Good morning, Mets fans, and welcome to a Thursday edition of Drivin with Mr. Met. I am Mr. Met. It is Thursday, March the 12th, and yes, I'm back for a second straight day in what seems like the first time in a really, really long time doing just that. But, as I said, I'm here, and I'm here to talk about our beloved New York Mets. I'm going to talk a little bit about yesterday's spring training game. I want to give some thoughts on Michael Conforto and what his injury might mean for the opening day lineup. I'm going to do that. I also want to talk about a story I read this morning on MetsBlog about new starting pitcher Rick Porcello. I'll do all of that on today's show. It's kind of a dreary day today. And that sort of coincides with what's happened with Michael Conforto, which is incredibly unfortunate for him and for the Mets. And it's that Conforto will more than likely not be starting the season on March 26th with the Mets. Instead, he'll more than likely be on the injured list because of a strained oblique. We now know what happened and what the source of the problem was. He tweaked his oblique. For people that have muscles in the stomach area, I am not one of them, but there's muscles in there somewhere, but that's that sort of side area of it's affectionately known as the love handle, where you'd have one if you didn't have muscles. But I digress. The anatomy lesson is over. That's where he hurt himself, and he did it trying to catch a fly ball while shielding his eyes from the sun. That's how easily these injuries can occur, which is so crazy when you think about these guys as professional athletes. And this is not a Mets thing by any means. This is across the board, especially in baseball. These oblique injuries are very common, and they're also very difficult to recover from. And that's the concerning part for me with Conforto, because I think the Mets can get by for 10 days or so without him. But to try to go longer than that, to try to go a month or more, 4, 5, 6 weeks without Conforto while he's rehabbing this injury, trying to get back to 100%. And as I said yesterday, I do not think the Mets should push him until he is 100%. But that being said, for 10 days or so, the Mets can figure out a configuration where J.D. Davis plays some third base, Jeff McNeil plays some right field, you leave Cespedes or whoever in left. You can figure it out for a couple of days, like I said. But when this goes on for weeks and weeks, that's when things become a little bit more tricky, because Jake Marisnick is the only true center fielder on this roster right now. And as we've seen in the past, he's not a hitter. He's a glove first, perhaps even a glove only guy on the team. But he's the only true center fielder. So if you start messing around with different outfield configurations, and maybe, as I said yesterday, slotting Nimmo over into right field, that means Marisnick's going to be starting and playing every single day. And that also assumes that Cespedes is completely healthy and is playing left field and is able to play left field every day, which remains to be seen. We don't even know if he's going to play. We've heard some good reports, of course, over the last couple of days, but we don't know anything beyond what's been reported. We haven't seen anything. He hasn't talked about how his body feels after playing a full game. There's a lot that needs to happen before the Mets can count on Cespedes for more than a couple of spots at a time. All that being said, the Conforto news is, if there's a silver lining, it's really the first negative story to come out of Mets spring training camp. And that's crazy when you think about all of the drama that unfolded throughout this offseason with the whole Beltran situation and his being removed and recognized as a manager who neither won nor lost a single game, the Luis Rojas insertion as the new manager, all of the noise surrounding all of that. The Zach Wheeler stuff where he went for the Phillies and he tried to stir up shit by talking about how the Mets didn't value him and blah, blah, blah. And all of that noise, as soon as spring training started, as soon as pitchers and catchers reported, it was like all that noise was gone and the camp was really workmanlike. It's been a really drama-free, professionally run camp, which is, it's a novel concept for the Mets, but it's happened. I mean, that's what's happened this season. And they've been, again, for the most part, without injury. This Conforto news is the first real injury news that we didn't already know about. You've got the Dellin Betances injury, but we knew about that coming in. It's not like it was a new injury. You had the minor scare with J.D. Davis, who I'll talk about in a minute. But the Conforto news, if there's any silver lining to this story, is that this is the first major blow to hit this team since the whole Beltran/Rojas debacle. So that's a positive sign, in my opinion. So since I mentioned J.D. Davis, let's talk a little bit about yesterday's game. J.D. Davis hit a home run, I believe his first of the spring. Jacob deGrom pitched 4 innings, was fantastic, gave up 1 hit, happened to be a solo home run to Matt Carpenter. After the game, deGrom said he feels fantastic, he's ready to go. He looks fantastic. He looks like he's in mid-season Cy Young form, and he remains a delight to watch pitch. Unfortunately, none of us were able to watch him pitch during the game yesterday because, for whatever reason, the game was not broadcast on any television station, nor was it broadcast on any radio station, which was weird because it was in Port St. Lucie. You figure it'd be on SNY, but I don't know, maybe they had conflicts with personnel and they couldn't get the guys in the booth. I don't know, whatever. It was just weird to have deGrom on the mound and the game not be on television anywhere. So the Mets ended up winning yesterday. Again, spring training doesn't matter, but I think they're now at 500 on the spring. Fine, doesn't matter. Last season in spring training, I paid really close attention to the numbers and who was performing well and who wasn't. And, based on what I did last year when I handed out spring training all-star awards, which was in retrospect really stupid, Robinson Cano looked like the MVP of the team last year, and Pete Alonso had a good spring, but we all know how things turned out for Robbie after opening day. It didn't turn out great for him. So I'm not paying that close attention to spring training numbers. It's why I'm not getting worked up over Pete Alonso's no home runs and slow start here. It's why I'm not getting worked up when it comes to Dellin Betances and his start the other day. It's I don't know what's happening here. There's a garbage truck in front of me that's kind of blocking the road, and I'm not sure if interesting. Anyhow, so yeah, that's why I'm not getting worked up about a lot of this stuff. Dellin Betances had a lackluster spring debut the other day, or last week. Whatever. It's nothing to get worked up about. There's no reason to get concerned over effectively nothing. And that's what this is. Spring training is nothing. It's practice. Right? We don't get worked up over practice. We shouldn't, and we won't, and I won't. So. Anyway, last piece of business I want to discuss this morning is Rick Porcello, or as some people like to call him, Rick Porcello, which I don't agree with. Although limoncello is pronounced limoncello and not lemoncello, so you could argue whatever. Don't. Rick Porcello. John Heyman wrote a really good piece on SNY on MetsBlog, talking about Porcello's pitch usage last year, and I will say that he is blaming, and Porcello is blaming, the Red Sox analytics department for his poor season. And the short story is that the Red Sox analytics guys, with all of these advanced video tools and whatever, identified a high spin rate for Porcello, and suggested that he move away from the sinker that made him so successful in previous years and to pitch more up in the zone. Who does that sound like? Sound a little bit like Noah Syndergaard? Noah Syndergaard does not go up in the zone that well. He's no Jacob deGrom. And you can see how with deGrom, it's that strategy has worked brilliantly for him. But for sinker guys who've established themselves as down in the zone pitchers, who have that weapon in their arsenal, at their disposal, to abandon that the way that the Red Sox suggested Porcello abandoned it last year, the way that Noah Syndergaard had abandoned it, it makes them less effective pitchers. And I don't know why there's no one looking at these analytical approaches and saying this is not a cookie cutter, right? This is not a one-size-fits-all approach to creating a good pitcher, right? Not all pitchers are the same. And to try and force all pitchers to do something because of one common factor, in this case spin rate for Porcello, is mind-boggling to me. You know, if you're molding a fresh piece of clay that's never been molded before, you don't have a background to say, boy, this guy was successful doing X, Y, and Z. We shouldn't change that. When you're bringing up a kid from AAA, or you're a pitching coach in the minors, and you're seeing this person's skill set for the first time, you can start building upon that skill set however you want. And I get that, and that's where analytics, I think, are really, really helpful to sort of mold these pitchers into what they become when they become major league players, major league pitchers. But to take a guy who's not only had success, but has won a freaking Cy Young, and to try to change the approach, to take a guy, again, like Noah Syndergaard, who was incredibly successful, and try and change his approach, I just don't understand that mindset at all. Stop trying to mess with what works for guys, and don't put players in a position where, like Porcello last year, he wanted to, quote, be a team player, and he didn't want to rebel against the analytics department, so he went along with it, and his season dramatically suffered from it. He did manage to win 14 games, 2 more than he lost, but that's only because the Red Sox had a fantastic offense. I mean, we all know that Porcello had the worst ERA in baseball last year amongst qualifying pitchers. So to look at that as anything other than an outlier from last season and think that there's no way that Porcello can be effective again, I think that's crazy. I think if he goes back to the basics, goes back to what made him successful, which it seems like this article from Heyman points out he's planning to do, if spring training, which I just said means nothing, is any indication, he looks like he's going to be just fine, Porcello, this year. So I just wanted to talk about that because I thought it was interesting. It was a really good story by Heyman. If you haven't read it, I suggest you go on MetsBlog and take a read through it. It's really worth your while. That's going to wrap it up for today. I appreciate you watching. Thanks for that, as always. Have any comments, questions, thoughts, concerns, throw them in the comment section below on YouTube, or you can hit me up on Twitter at Mr_Met. That's MISTER_MET. And as always, let's go Mets.